right. Okay, I just wanted to double check. Okay, you can see it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So my name is Peter Knoll. I'm a solutions architect at Trifecta. This is a Trifecta building, so this is where I work. I'm a Salesforce MVP and have multiple Salesforce certifications. I've been working with Salesforce for about 5 years, a little bit more. Today is the 5th anniversary of my first Salesforce certification, Salesforce developer certification. I remember thinking how hard it was and how when I went to take it, like, oh, this will be nothing. This is just one of those typical industry certification tests. You study a little bit and you breeze by it. And I got to the end of it and I went to press submit. And I was thinking to myself, my God, this was so hard. And I was just crossing my fingers. I passed, and you know, the rest is history. Now, I think back then there were maybe 6 certs, because I don't think that they had technical architect yet. So it was a pretty big deal if you could get 6 certifications. Now there's like a million.
Like 23.
Okay, 23. To say this guy probably has them all. So anyway, tonight what I want to talk about is the new features in Spring 17 that are useful to developers. As I said, what I'd like you to get out of it is not a complete 100% understanding of every little detail of the features, but kind of this feature's here. I'm going to go do some work. I can remember that there was something that could do that, something along those lines. Because in reality, there's so many new things that come out all the time. But I would encourage you to get a developer edition and go in and try some of the stuff. So I'm going to talk about some new features, some critical updates, and then some other announcements that are timely to you right now. So there's a lot of new stuff coming out in Lightning, and more and more stuff is coming out in the Lightning experience that is not available in Salesforce Classic. So here's this example of being able to assign record pages by app, record type, and profile that is new in Spring 17. So a record home page is basically kind of in the equivalent of like a page layout in the Salesforce Classic, the detail page. So in Lightning experience, you now have the ability to not just assign it by record type and profile, but you can bring in the app as well. You can set an org default, then you can set an app default, and then you can go in further and specify at the app record type and profile combination. So it's pretty cool. For different apps, you could have different objects. It's not so somebody's coming in and looking at the account in this app with this profile, they get a different view than in some other one. There are a few new components. So in the Lightning App Builder, it's a drag and drop UI where you can drag pre-configured components and build your Lightning pages, a Lightning home page or a Lightning record page. And there are standard Salesforce components. There are your custom components that you write, and there are managed package components that you install from the App Exchange. And this is a standard component they've come out with. It's the related list component. So they have a related lists component where it shows all the different related lists from the page layout. And this is just a related list component, which allows you to get more granular and choose just the individual related list. And that's what it looks like.
Peter, do you recall under there it says parent record?
Yep.
Use this case, what some of the other options were?
For
What to pick for the parent record rather than just using the case that you're on. Are there other options?
Oh, for the related list.
Yeah. Maybe you don't recall all of them.
I don't recall off the top of my head, but there were a couple other options, and it's closely related to the related record component. This one's really cool. The related record component allows you to drag a component on a page, and then of a related record. So it could be like a contact that's related to something, or an account that's a lookup field or something like that. And the thing that's pretty cool about it is you can edit right on the page itself. So I know sometimes that can be one of the complaints in Lightning Classic is you have to click too much to get to different things. Well, here you don't have to do that at all. You can kind of edit right from the page that you're on. You can edit the related record with this related record component. So you can update or create a new, trying to streamline everything into the one page. The other thing that is new is Lightning console apps. So like the console apps are now supported inside of Lightning, and you can add Lightning components to them. So this is a huge productivity thing. One of the things that has always been useful in Salesforce is the Service Cloud console, which is also the Sales Cloud console, basically, because you didn't have to use it necessarily for service, where you can have the different related records and tabs and stuff like that open. Well, now you can have that inside of Lightning. So that's one more reason that you can move over to use the Lightning experience. There is some functionality that's not there yet, like Live Agent, for example, isn't available. So if you're using Live Agent, you still want to go back to Classic for that piece of it.
This is in beta still, right?
Yes, this is a beta feature. This is something that's very useful for porting applications over to Lightning. This is the Lightning container component. So the Lightning container component will allow you to embed other apps inside of a Lightning component. So before you couldn't really put Angular apps or something like that inside or React or something like that inside of a Lightning component. So you might have a lot of previous code that depends on, that has different Angular, like an Angular app or something like that, and you couldn't use it inside of a Lightning component or use any pieces of any of it inside of a Lightning component. And there were issues around locker service and stuff like that. But with this Lightning container component, you can now use them inside of it, and you can communicate between the two different apps. There's a way to send messages in the JavaScript with this message method, and then there's a way to specify a handler to receive messages. I mean, you still have to code the app to send the messages to it and stuff like that, but it's just another tool. You know, people have spent a lot of time investing in Angular and stuff like that, or React, and this allows them to have some level of reuse.
Would this be similar to like a Canvas app, but inside the Lightning experience?
Well, it's kind of similar. So on here, what you can see is the source that you specify. And in this particular case, it's an Angular app, and you're specifying the index.html. So it's like having a single page app inside of your Lightning component. So you might have some sort of, I mean, typically if I'm thinking of an Angular app, I'm thinking of some larger app that takes up the whole entire page or something like that. But you still could have some smaller, like click-through payment app or something like that, that you have and you've written in Angular, and maybe that's fine inside of your Lightning component. Well, now you can toss it inside of the Lightning component and point your source to the index.html page
So
and
if you
use
wanted
it.
like a Stripe checkout,
Yeah,
you get through an order and then you pop it up.
you could have something like that if you had an Angular app like that, like a Stripe checkout. You could throw that in here. So it's another tool to be able to be used. The other thing, if you're thinking of porting over Angular stuff to and you're thinking of getting rid of Angular and just using Lightning, if your Angular stuff is using remote actions, the Lightning Apex controllers use basically remote actions. They use something called Aura-enabled actions. So if you wanted to get rid of your third-party app altogether, but continue to use the Apex remote actions that you were using in it, you basically can. So another thing is that is a pretty big deal, but it's kind of under the radar, is the Unbound Expressions. It's this one-way data binding between components. So it's this new syntax, and other frameworks have stuff like this already in place. And the thing that you kind of gain out of it is some efficiencies where the framework doesn't have to have as much overhead involved in listening to the different events that are going on and digesting and re-rendering and stuff like that, if you can use this. So you don't have to use the bidirectional all the time anymore. You can now use so if you have some output and it's just output and you don't want it to carry back to wherever it was declared, you can just use the unbound. So I haven't like tried to benchmark it or anything like that, but that's the purpose of it, or one of the benefits of it is supposed to be the efficiencies that you gain, speed. So there's another thing that's come out in developer preview, is overriding tokens in your Lightning app. So you can override your tokens by name, and then inside of your app, you specify the tokens that you're using. So this is an application. This isn't a component. So this isn't like you're in a Lightning component and you're overriding standard standard tokens. So take a step back and explain the tokens are part of an application or Lightning component bundle that define you can kind of think of it as abstracting out values into a central place that you can then reference back in your CSS. So if your code changes, in this case, your color text brand changes, you can just modify the value inside of this file, and then in your actual CSS files, you refer to the color text brand. So with this Spring 17 release, you have the ability to override some of the standard tokens. So to get a list of the standard tokens, you can go to the Lightning Design System .com page, and it's also in the Lightning Developer Guide has a list of all the standard components as well. But again, this is an app, so it's not a Lightning component itself that so you're not in a Lightning component saying, I want something to look a little bit different. It's your app. So that's kind of outside of the Lightning experience. Another one that's big is Lightning out for guest users. So ever since Lightning out was announced on every webinar that they've ever had, somebody has asked the webinar presenters, does Lightning out work with guest users? And it never had. It didn't. So now it finally does. Yeah, I would ask them, or other people would ask, because it's really important if you're building Lightning components, right? And so here's the use case for guest users: is you're building a community and you have Lightning components. You have Lightning components in a Visualforce page, for example, would be one thing. Or if you're building some sort of, I guess more common would be something like you build some sort of Lightning component widget that gets some information from your org and displays it. And you're using that internally or whatever. But now you want to take that, and it looks pretty cool. You want to throw it on your website. It doesn't run inside of Salesforce or anything like that. So you want to use Lightning out, but you don't want to, bother authenticating or anything like that. So I think with the website one, you might still have to do the authentication, but with the I haven't tested that yet. But with the community guest user, you're fine getting it in that. But the one thing you have to be careful with is the CRUD and the FLS aren't enforced in Lightning components. So in Visualforce, if you just reference the fields in input and output fields, the FLS is enforced and it won't show a certain field. But in Lightning components, if you reference them, it will show the fields regardless of whether or not the profile has access to it.
I would add one more thing too. When you're using the standard like Visualforce components, they also will check for like HTML code and JSON code and protect against input coming from a user that may be malicious when you're going this method as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Carl. So you want to make sure that you check the input and sanitize everything. It's not going to do that automatically for you. So I think I remember hearing that was on the roadmap. So hopefully that'll come, because that's a pretty big deal. The whole the metadata around inputs and output fields that Visualforce gives you will eventually be in Lightning components. So then there's another really useful thing. This seems so useful that I wish it was around always. You have the ability to disable standard pages for Force.com sites. So one of the things you might do if you're developing kind of basically websites that run on top of Salesforce that you don't really want to look like Salesforce, like maybe an event registration or something like that. You don't want, the company wants it branded like not to look like Salesforce. They want it to look like their own brand, and you can do that. And you gain a lot by not having separate integrations with Salesforce or anything like that. Sorry, but you could always URL hack the URL if your page wasn't properly configured or your site wasn't properly configured. And even in some cases, if it was properly configured, you could still, the savvy user could still go up to your URL and hack it. So maybe the guest user has access to contacts or something like that, or contact list view, or something. The tab setting is still on their profile. Somebody could go up and hack the URL and get to the detail page of a list view or something like that and see more information. So it was always best practice to try to get your FLS, the tabs off, all that different stuff, get the page layouts configured correctly, home console components and all that different stuff. But now you actually have the ability to have this checkbox that you can disable the access to Salesforce standard pages. So I would encourage anybody who's working with any sites that are like the ones I described to get to a sandbox and test that out and see how it works out. It might be worth rolling into production. So then there's another cool thing is the SLDS inside of Visualforce pages. So there's a lot of thought around, so do Lightning components completely replace Visualforce? And Visualforce is going to go away and all that other stuff. And it's not necessarily the case. There's still use cases for an actual page that you want to create, or multiple pages that aren't Lightning components. And you want them to be styled like the Salesforce Lightning experience. The way that you had to do that before was you had to get a static resource, upload the Lightning design system, and then reference it inside of your code. Now it's been abstracted away into a standard Visualforce component. You see there, the Apex SLDS. The benefit of that is that you don't have to worry about different things like changing out versions if they change or anything like that. You don't have to. The other benefit is you don't have to worry about storage space for your static resource, which I think the org limit is like 250, maybe 250 megabytes. So, I mean, depending on your org configuration, you could get up there. So I encourage you to look at that if you're using SLDS. And you can see right here, you can immediately use the SLDS classes. And the other thing that this code sample has that's kind of interesting is this asset. So here you're inside of Visualforce, right? So this isn't a Lightning component. You're using the Visualforce syntax, the URL for, and you have the asset SLDS instead of the resource SLDS, because resource is your static resources. Asset is this other thing that is the Salesforce. So kind of interesting. I don't know, they might have other assets. I didn't look.
Is that new? Asset?
Yes, I think it is. I don't remember seeing it before, but it's possible that it was there before. I don't remember seeing it. So then there's this other cool thing that is available for you to use right now. It's called the Apex Stub API. We recently had a meetup here, and it's available on YouTube, where Jesse Altman presented on Apex mocks using the Stub API. So you don't need to provide the no-arg constructor anymore. That's something that's noteworthy. You used to have to provide a no-arg constructor, and then the pattern I think that Jesse talked about was that you would put an assert statement in there with test is running test to make sure that it wasn't called when you weren't running a test. Well, now you don't need that no-arg constructor, and you can also mock exceptions and schedulable and queuable as well. So that's pretty cool, mocking the exceptions to do certain things. And I would encourage anyone who wants to know more about it to look at this YouTube link that I have in here. And I hope to see more from people starting to use this and see more blog posts and more contributions and open source, and see Apex mocks grow itself or other libraries come out too. So there were many different API enhancements, and I include a link at the end of this presentation to Andrew Fawcett, who works at Financial Force. He has a great blog called Andy in the Cloud, and his latest blog post summarizes all of the different APIs and what's changed about them, but kind of succinctly, so it's readable and what's great about it. And one of the things is that the composite calls in REST API are GA. So if you've ever worked with the REST API, you're probably used to being able to insert an object or something like that, or call maybe a custom endpoint you can call that does some stuff and creates a couple different objects. Well, with the composite calls, you're able to make one call that inserts multiple objects that are related. So instead of having a whole bunch of different API calls back and forth over the network and stuff like that, you can make this one call and you can reference. So up here you can see there's a reference to the account ID for when you want to insert the contact. So the contact references that account ID from above. So it can be useful in mobile applications, stuff like that, where you want things to go quickly. You don't want to insert the account, get the response back, insert the contact, get the response back, insert the order, all that other stuff. You can make the one call. And there are some other APIs around the composite and stuff like that. So I would encourage you to go out to the developer guide for the REST API and look into that. There are some other variations on these composite calls that are useful as well. But it's definitely worth looking at if you're doing anything with the REST API, or like I said, especially mobile. So Salesforce Connect, I don't know if everybody knows this, but you can actually use Salesforce Connect to connect to other orgs. So I think that if you purchase Salesforce Connect for other orgs, I think you can connect 5 of them in one purchase. What that allows you to do is seamlessly treat all the objects and like external objects. And the cool thing that was introduced this time was not just read-only. Now you can create, update, and delete external objects. So you can hook together multiple Salesforce orgs and be creating, updating, and deleting between all of them. Behind the scenes, it uses the REST API, so you have to be really careful with how you're doing that. So it might not always be the best solution if you're doing a lot of different things between the different orgs to use this, but you just have to take that into consideration. Another thing is flows and Lightning. So now you can have flows in Lightning and they'll run with this Lightning look and feel. Additionally, there's a flow component for App Builder that you can use. So I know that flows are very popular, and Process Builder is also very popular. And one of the sticking points for using Lightning Experience is if you have a lot of different flows, it wasn't as clean to be able to cut over. But now you can use them in the Lightning Experience, and there's an actual flow component that you can add into your pages. It's one of the standard components. Very useful. So this is another thing that is available, is called Path for custom objects. So when Lightning Experience first came out, one of the first things that Salesforce showed was the opportunity page, and it showed like the opportunity stages kind of at the top, and it's the path that you go as you're selling on the opportunity. It was called the sales path, and it would kind of step you through. Now you're on step 1. Now you're on step 2. It looks like a kind of like a long color-coded arrow. And when everybody saw that, the first thing was like, that is great. Can I use that on other objects? I have an ordering process or whatever type of process, and I would love to use it on that, but you couldn't. But now you can. Now you can have it on your custom objects. So you can feel free to add that path in there to kind of help guide your users along. Useful, like I said, for like ordering and stuff like that. You can see at what stage you're in.
There are quotes out of the box.
Quotes.
It's part of an opportunity. You can see it now.
Great on quotes out of the box. Yeah, so very useful for people to know where they're at as they're working on something and where they're headed and where they've been. This is a very, very useful thing. It was kind of small, in a small detail in the release notes, but then there was a post on the Salesforce developers blog the other day, and what it is there are Picklist API names. So one of the problems with Picklist before is it just had the label and that was it. And so, I mean, you could do stuff with translated values and stuff like that on Picklist, but you had the Picklist value, and then the admin or somebody would go in and change the Picklist value, and then your code that was testing to see, was the Picklist value that was selected, does it equal this string? Because that's all you had. And then they go in and change the value, and now your code breaks because it doesn't match that anymore. Well, now the label and the value are separate. So you can reference the value everywhere. They call it it's an API name when you're setting it up. So now you can reference that value and check against that. So now if the admin goes in and changes the label changes, but the value behind the label of your Picklist entry changes, but the value behind it stays the same. So, I mean, there could still be use cases where you want a different kind of, you kind of want to eliminate that previous Picklist value and have a new one. So where you want the label and value to both change. But in the cases where you just really want the label to change, this is great.
How does that work if you're going to put text string?
You put the text string, as the label, and then you can specify whatever. You might have something like, say you had like Picklist values for rating something, and it was like bad, good, great, or something like that, and you wanted to change it to like bad, good, excellent, or something like that. So in your code, maybe the value for the great one started off as great, but the label was great. Now you change the label to excellent. Your code still references get value as great. Maybe you use something else like level 1, 2, 3, make it really generic. But in the your code references the API name with the get value.
I mean, so sorry, I don't mean on the changing it on the actual field. I'm talking about you're a developer, right? You want to pick this on an object. You want to put a value into it, like the actual record. You're going to change it to a non-value pick list. Well, did that match up to anything? So I guess my point is, like, when on the object itself, on the record, are they storing the label or the API name, or has any of that changed? Is it technically it's treated like a string right now?
Yes, there's the label and a value.
So if you just set it to, in your example, you have 1, 2, 3.
Oh yeah.
And I say, well, I'm going to set it to test, the word test. What would the value be? Do I have to set that myself?
Set it to the word test. Oh, if it's not included. Oh, you mean if it's not included in the pick? If it's not one of the picklist ones?
Yeah. Exactly.
That's a good question. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I suspect it's the same. Yeah. Right. I assume. My guess is that it would store test in both of them, but I don't know. That's a good question. It's worth investigating.
Do you know how this is getting turned on? Is it automatic? Do you have to go back and populate values?
No, I think it's automatic. Yeah. Yeah.
What if I have 2 yeses in my pick list? You can't. And what if, like, there's
I don't think you can do that.
I assume there's a limit. I assume there's a limit to the length, right? Of value.
Probably, but it's probably limited to whatever the length is.
What if my labels are the same first 255 characters and uniqueness at the end? So I think there's some interesting edge cases in how that gets enabled across.
It's probably worth looking into, but my guess is that that's been accounted for.
You know what? It got me interested because
yeah.
Now you're adding values where you never had values before.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't look at
what your code does and how it behaves.
I didn't look at the specific constraints around what value and label can be, like what the length restrictions are. I'm guessing they're the same, but I don't know. It's worth checking out.
Yeah,
It's cool.
But anyway, it's much more like the typical select option in every other language. So another cool thing that came out is the web to lead reCAPTCHA. So web to lead is great, and it's nice to have on your website. But if you have any sort of popular website or you just don't want to get spammed, you have to put one of these things in place. And now Salesforce added in the ability to just do it first class. You can sign up with Google, you get your API key, you put it in here, and then in the HTML that's generated for your web to lead, you get that automatically. Saves a lot of time. What's great about
charge for that?
I don't think so, but I don't know. It's a good question. What's nice about it is the pattern before it, you kind of required somebody a lot more technical, maybe with developer experience, to make sure that you could do it. Now, it's just what's our API key? It's done. So it's pretty cool. So another thing that I wanted to bring up, this isn't for this release, but it's a pretty big deal, is the Lightning Locker service. So the Lightning Component Lockers, what the Lightning Component Locker service is, you have your Lightning experience page and you have a whole bunch of Lightning components on it. They're from various sources, standard, custom, managed package, and stuff like that. And there's a security issue where one component, because it's all in the same DOM, there's a security issue where one component could reach over to another component, affect each other and stuff like that. And you don't want to allow that to happen. So Salesforce has Locker service, which prevents that from happening and makes it so that code running inside of a component can only affect itself, basically. And it wasn't always like that. Locker service came after Lightning components came out. So it didn't always have to be there. And there are certain unsafe operations and stuff like that that it'll prevent, and access to kind of behind the scenes JavaScript that you might have been able to do, it'll prevent. So kind of JavaScript that's not part of their public API. And the issue is that it didn't always exist. So there is code out there that will break if this turns on. And it's been trying to be turned on, I guess, for a while. And the drop dead date is going to be June 14th, 2017. So if you're doing anything with Lightning components or know anybody that is, they should definitely make sure that their code can work against this. Have a sandbox and turn it on and see what happens. So there's some links here to get detailed a video about it. And then there are different tools available in the Lightning Developer Guide that you can look at as well.
The other thing I would add, there used to be a separate setting for communities where Locker service was going to be enabled in communities and you could do it differently. That's all been done away with. It's one update and it's going to apply to everything.
Yep, that's right. So with this release, you're still in the area where you have the ability to not have it on yet. And when managed packages are installed and stuff like that, you can have it off. But with the next release in summer 17, it's done, it's in. And if your stuff isn't working, it's just gonna fail. And you gotta go back and fix it. So there are a couple other general announcements that I want to talk about for this time period. Salesforce DX is in pilot right now. So there was a blog post recently on the Salesforce developers site about this Salesforce DX. I was at Dreamforce and they had a whole bunch of different sessions on it. They've been on some stuff with, or there's been another blog post about kind of one of their Salesforce developers evangelist experience with Salesforce DX. If you can join it by 2/10, there's a link in here. So by February 10th, to be considered for the pilot. And basically what Salesforce DX is supposed to be is the future of development. It's the developer experience. It's supposed to kind of make Salesforce development much more like much nicer on developers, I guess is the way to put it. So kind of the pain points that we've had in the past, whether it's version control, moving stuff from org to org, spinning up orgs quickly, continuous integration, deployments, rollback versions, stuff like that. All that stuff's in there, lots of different tools. So I would encourage everybody to go in and look at getting into the pilot.
It's easy to do. I just did it on my phone.
That's awesome. So yeah, I did it. That pilot link has been out there for a while. So I've done it, and the worst that can happen is you join it and then you don't have time for it or something like that. But it's definitely worth checking out. It's the future of development in Salesforce.
It's actually really cool. I'm part of the pilot currently, so if anybody has any specific questions they want to ask, feel free to ask.
Okay. There's some general stuff with Trailhead. So if you are a Trailhead member now, you probably got an email about this today, I think, about some of this stuff. But there is a Trailhead Sweepstakes going on through February 9th. So if you've never used Trailhead and you have some amount of time, it's worth going in and using Trailhead to get entered into their sweepstakes automatically. They have various prizes. I think they're giving away 5 $1,000 gift cards, like maybe 50 or some $25 gift cards, some tiles, a bunch of different cool kind of tech stuff. So definitely worth checking out. There's a brand new super badge. That's the data integration specialist. I did this super badge. It's very nice. It tells you all about, or you get to learn and implement stuff all about SOAP, REST, creating your own REST endpoint, stuff with like name credentials and things like that that are pretty useful. And finally, have some links here for different things with Spring 17. So I'd encourage you to go and look at the release notes. there's always, I don't know if everybody knows this, but there's always a list of fixed issues. If you just Google Salesforce known issues, you'll get to a link for the open issues that Salesforce has acknowledged and is in the works of fixing, or maybe not. And with every release, you can get a link to all of the fixed issues that are going to be in that release. So that's kind of nice. Idea Exchange has something similar. You can go and look. And then there is this link to this API Junkies. I think that was the name of Andrew Fawcett. That's his blog, Andy in the Cloud, all about the different APIs, changes, and upgrades with this release, which I said that there were a lot. And then finally, there's this pre-release sign up. And even if you don't want to get in on Spring 17, it's because it is going to be coming out soon, so maybe you'll wait. It's worth signing up for the pre-release. Once you sign up for the pre-release, you don't lose the org. So this says Spring 17 pre-release, but it's really a pre-release org that you're in forever. So if you sign up now for the Spring 17 pre-release, when Summer 17 gets put on that pre-release org, you have access to it right away. You don't have to sign up again. So like you could kind of work backwards from when it's supposed to go in the sandboxes, and you could start looking in your pre-release org to see when it's there. And you kind of get
maybe even a day or two early.
Yeah, you can kind of get a little bit early access even. So it's nice to have something like that. You can always stay a little bit ahead. But I think that's all that I have for tonight. Does anybody have any questions?
There's a question online from Daniel Ballmer, actually.
Okay.
He wants to know your thoughts on ISV partners getting access to the Apex debugger.
The Apex debugger. So my thoughts on the Apex debugger is I think that everybody should have access to it for free. But I know that there are some technical limitations behind the scenes that make it so that a price has to be put on it, I guess. But specifically, what I think is really nice about the partners being able to get access is being able to debug in subscriber orgs, and having that ability is great. So again, I think that should be another thing that should be free for everybody, being able to debug, whether you're debugging in the subscriber org or not. So I think that can save a ton of time.
Even without the debugger, are you able now to see your managed code in the subscriber org? Did I see that without the debugger? Or is that required?
I'm not sure.
Debugger?
Can you? I don't know.
I thought it was coming in.
Okay, it could be.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
May have missed that. I haven't been doing ISV work, so I probably glossed over that part.
The important part.
Yeah.
Anything else on that?
Yeah, so this wasn't really a question, but it was more of a comment. So with the Composite API calls, it's still pretty bad if you want to do updates of bulk data. For instance, maybe a dozen records of the same type. The main problem is they all go into different sub requests. And then he gave me a link to an article that kind of explains all this.
Okay.
So I'll make sure to post it on the meetup, and we'll have it on the YouTube and stuff.
Okay, great. Thanks. Cool. Okay. That's everything. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Peter.